Hello? Good? All right. Just give me 1 second. Get these questions up for everybody. In the meantime, um, let's introduce our panelists, right? Let's start with Jane.
So my name is Jane Allard. I'm a CTO at a startup called CarbonArc. We're making a data intelligence platform. I have over 20 years experience and as a engineering leader. I was at Akamai and before that was at MathWorks.
Well, hi, my name is Peter Kai. I was most recently the VP of Engineering at Privy, a local e-commerce marketing startup here in Boston. Prior to that, I was the founder of a music and podcast hosting startup called KV6. And before that, I worked at Microsoft and a few other startups. Happy to be here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Vayu. I'm a co-founder and CTO at York IE. We are a venture capital and services firm for startups. And my history is heavy in product management and engineering leadership. At a company called Dyn, we exited it to Oracle Cloud, and I spent several years at Oracle Cloud before helping co-found York IE.
And I'm Warren Clark, as alluded to earlier. I'm a former JP Morgan software engineer and Drift software engineer. So we're in good hands. We have very bright minds. So I'm going to jump straight into it. This is a common question, and I know someone here has an answer that we may need. So how do I evaluate the type of talent that we need in this particular space when developing the product, of course? Jane, would you like to start?
Sure. So if you're going to be at a startup, you're going to have a small team. So you have to make sure that you find people that are multi-talented. They have expertise in different areas, and you want to look at what you're building and what kind of technology you're looking for. But you're also looking for people who are just willing to learn and kind of take initiative and get stuff done independently, because that's what you have to do all the time at a startup. So you're looking for people who have that kind of attitude. If anyone wants to add stuff.
Yeah, I love that. I think the other thing that I always consider is, work backwards from your goals. This is sort of an Amazon philosophy too, about working backwards, right? They often start projects with defining like your press release first. Like, what are you going to announce? And then work backwards from there. So that's a good way to set a goal and a milestone that you want to achieve, and then work backwards to that of what team members. But Jane hit the nail on the head. Like, flexibility in startups is key, because you're going to wear many hats along the way.
The only thing I'll add to that is I think a lot of people look for candidates who are okay with doing both back end and front end, or whatever. I like to look for people who like to own the whole end-to-end value chain, and not just are okay with it, but are energized by it. It's not just done when you've shipped it or merged it or whatever. It's not done until the value is delivered to the customer. And being able to find people who are excited by learning how to operate the software and run it and do the DevOps and take the customer support tickets and just really internalize what problem they're solving and delivering that value, and who are energized by that, I think is really key for your early hires.
Yeah, in interviews, one trick I've been using sometimes is always look for people that lean in a little extra into the challenge. You can have the perfect candidate from a resume perspective and skill sets perspective, but unless they truly lean in and own the whole value prop, they're going to hit hurdles that are not solvable, and they'll throw the hands up and say, at my last company, I had a whole team that did that other thing, and that type of thing. That just is impossible at a startup, right? And so, yeah, just look for those people that lean in a little extra.
Yeah, from what you're saying about the ownership, you're looking for people who have really strong ownership of what they're doing. And to go back to resume questions, I look for people who not just did more, but did stuff of their own initiative. So a question I ask is, when someone tells me about a project, the first thing is, well, why did you do this project? And if someone's answer always is somebody told me to do it, they're just not going to work out that role. You need someone who's well, I had this idea and I had to pitch this, I had to figure this stuff out to get it to happen. For people who are able to overcome challenges.
That was a great answer as well. So to piggyback off this ownership idea that we've kind of found through the pros and cons of keeping development in-house versus outsourcing, how do we navigate those two?
I'm biased. So I run an offshore type agency, but I'll sort of describe a little bit of how I got here, because I think, this came out of my own challenges and needs too, right? So when we co-founded York IE, my first thing was to build our own software and operating system for York IE. We call it Fuel. It's our platform that we build our services and tech enable our own staff onto. And when I was building that team, I wanted to leverage a little bit of best of both worlds. I wanted some local talent that I knew and trusted, experience from my past that I could hire locally and would sit next to me and lean in on my problems and live and breathe my problems day to day with me. And I wanted to tap into the talent and scale that offshore capabilities could provide. Primarily ended up finding a great leader and capability from a gentleman in India. And we slowly started to build a team around him in India. Fast forward, a lot of the startups that we work with at York IE wanted some help on their platform. So we were saying we started to scale that up a little bit more talent on the US side for leadership and a little bit more talent on the India side for helping code and get through challenges in development. And so, we were able to then productize exactly this sort of hybrid nature. And that's what we offer a lot of companies that we work with today, is that sort of SaaS experience and product development experience and leadership, primarily US based, understand our culture and our business challenges a little bit more from a US lens, and scale and talent and capabilities from India. And so that's the way we've done it. I often even advise my clients to do the same. I'm not saying that you need to only hire our team and staff to answer your problems. Hire your own, slowly train up your own staff, but continue to tap into some of the other opportunities out there from an offshore and nearshore capability as well.
And to add on to that, when you're looking at what you're going to bring in house versus what you're going to do contractors for, if you're going offshore, you can reduce costs and there's also more flexibility of when you're going to need a project or not need a project. But one thing where I've seen at least work out better for us when we've had it, we want to be in-house, is if it's really core to your business, it's your core IP, or you're doing something really kind of new. And because what I have seen when we work with the contractors, it goes much easier if you're using a standard technology or standard stack, because they usually those contractors just know that out of the box. So it's a lot easier to get started than if you're trying to come up with something really, really brand new. That was easier for us to do in-house.
Absolutely. I think those are all great points. The only thing I'll add is coming from an area where I don't have a lot of expertise in this, I will warn people that working with external contractors and consultants is a specific skill. It's not one that translate one for one. If you have management experience, for example, with an in-house team, some things are just different and you have to respect that. So if you're doing this as sort of a bet the company sort of move, just know that that's the risk that you're taking on. But this is a thing that isn't necessarily, something that you can bring skills in from other domains and expect those to apply here.
I always sort of, just to dovetail onto that too, I think I always talk about it the crafting skill. You need someone good at crafting work, to work with an external team that can do the work, right? You got to plan still and understand how it connects in. And so I often talk about that like a crafter, to make sure that you have that skill set. But you're right, you can't just ask a bunch of engineers that are used to doing themselves to work with an offshore team and it's all going to work perfectly. There'll be likely challenges. The other thing I will sort of advocate for is any sort of contractor, whether it's locally or offshore or whatever, you got to have the mindset that this person is part of your team. They should live with you, dream with you, just like they are. You pay them differently, yes, but they're part of your team and they should have the same ambitions and excitement towards your vision as any other team member. And so, that's always been my philosophy. And I think why, our early engagement with India started to work so well is we dreamt together, we grew together, we were having fun together. And so, if you sponsor that sort of culture, not only within your company, but with your contractors too, you'll be much more successful.
With that being said, is there any aid offered with these early stage companies as far as discounts for software goes?
Are you talking from York IE specifically or not? I guess,
or you can speak to your experience, most definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, there's different engagement levels. There's cash and equity type engagement levels for sure. You got to find the right development partner. I think if you can't go to a development partner that's used to working maybe with enterprises and you're a startup and it's cash, packaging and pricing models and just engagement levels are going to not work. So you got to make sure that you're used to someone that's at working with companies like yours. And so I would ask for a lot of good references and those types of things. And so, everybody needs to eventually pay their bills, right? So you got to make sure that you're working with partnerships that are, it's a win-win for everybody. I think it's truly a partnership type conversation. Because at the end of the day, people have expenses and salaries and everything that everybody's going home with. Yeah.
And as far as like finding software that I guess caters to your particular company, what's the process to do so? So can you just walk me through that a little bit more?
Like software development practices?
Or yeah.
I think you're talking about like third party or like what kind of tools you should use.
So
the question or about development.
Just about development. So what's right for my business in particular? So I know that my business is this particular XYZ.
Yeah.
How can I go out from forth?
Yeah. I'll let you guys go.
Work in tech for 20 years.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, this is like the CTO's job, right? Like you have to be the expert. You have to have a network of people that you can count on as subject matter experts who you can talk to for advice. But if you're in year one of that, then go to conferences, develop a lot of things, deploy a lot of things, take calls from sales reps, let them pitch you. Sign up for newsletters. You have to have exposure to a lot of things to know what works well. And by the time you're like founding the startup, you have to be the expert. Like you have to know and it's a domain specific answer, right? Like if you're working in life sciences versus web apps, like you need to have an understanding at least at a base level for like what are some things I need to rule out, like what is not going to be a good solution, and work from there. And a lot of the time, like what is the best thing for X is like really like I reject the premise of the question, because like the best thing is the technology that you're really good at and that you know well. And like there's never a substitute for that when you're like early at a difficult startup and you're like, oh, I heard this is the best technology to use. Let me just start using it, and I'm a newbie at it. That's a recipe for failure, I think, most of the time.
One of the things I look at is like you don't want to reinvent the wheel. So if it's core to your business, then maybe you're trying to make something new in that space. But other than that, use like known solutions, especially known solutions in even a smaller space. Like what works for an enterprise isn't necessarily going to work for you. Go back to what you were saying about what you know as well. Like if there's like 5 things and they're all about equally good, you might as well pick the one you know, because you can be the fastest at that one. And things also change all the time. So like you're like what's best today is going to be different a year from now. So you just have to always like what you're saying, like always be paying attention, conferences, like newsletters, like talking to people. I find like LinkedIn, I see a lot of people post stuff on there about what's coming and what's new. And if you're find something that doesn't work, then you can go to be like, well, what's happening in the space? And then you want to like take that risk to bring something in that's unknown after you've at least tried to see if like the known thing works.
Yeah, I love that. It's like spending the time on your roadmap, which costs money, the resources on your roadmap on value added things for your company, right? If you're saying to yourself, I just need 6 months to build that thing, and then we can do the value added thing on top of it, you're probably making a build buy decision incorrectly, right? You probably could have bought something for that 6 months and then built on top of it, right? And so build buy decisions and like keeping that focus. But to Peter's point, like you need to have someone with that experience and breadth of experiences just to be a good sounding board for you. It doesn't have to be you all the time, but you can, as long as you're using the right sounding boards, you can gain that experience.
Most definitely. And as far as minimizing rework, how to build the right thing in the shortest amount of time. Any tips on that?
Prioritize.
Yeah.
So fun story, when we were at Dine, a few years ago, we actually started to get to the point where we would have a top 10 priorities for that quarter. There was a maximum of 10 priorities in our engineering development. We had 100 engineers, and there were 10 priorities we would focus on. And so if you don't prioritize ruthlessly, then you're going to be spending time on things that just aren't moving the needle, and you're going to be less successful on all of it. So prioritization is just a key here to making sure that you're actually going to deliver the thing you need.
I think you want to try to find like fastest path to a test. Even like if you have known users, like you can show them a prototype. You don't even have to necessarily even build anything to get feedback on it. So like what is the fastest path to get information, or whether you're going in the right direction? And if you really have no idea about what direction you're going, like don't spend too much time on like making it super like robust, because you might just throw it away a week later. So it's like finding that where you can accept risk and where you can't, and what you're trying to build and what you're going to test to make sure you're going in the right direction. So as you get closer to knowing you go right direction, then you can start building all the guardrails around what you've made.
Perfect.
Like what you're saying, like get to value.
Yeah,
Like there's no point in making the best like website in the world if no one ever goes there.
exactly.
So it's like, how do you figure out that I'm doing the right thing first?
And the importance around SDLC best practices, where to cut corners as far as that goes. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I have an answer.
I think you go for it.
I don't think you should ever cut corners in code review. So if someone asks me like, what is the highest thing you want to do for what you're shipping is code review. But going back to the guardrails, you don't necessarily want to write a huge like test infrastructure and automated test for something that you're just going to get rid of a week later. So like, how do you ensure that you're doing something okay? You at least need to have common code review practices in your team. That's a place. Do not cut a corner.
Yes.
And source control.
From a general, I mean, I love the reviews emphasis, but like making sure that the spirit of everything is followed more than the like exact process in the early days is so much more important. Like, so I think just good quality conversations with your team repeatedly on making sure that we're reviewing the right things, and are we planning the backlog correctly, and do we have the sprint planned ahead of time, and are we following through, and what's our velocity on a regular basis. But like, you know, if a ticket needs to carry at the end of the day because it just didn't get done, like let the ticket carry. You know, like don't have too hard rules on these things, especially in the early days. The rules and tools and processes should firm up as you scale, right? So like a smaller team can keep it together with good alignment from a spiritual culture perspective. A larger team needs more rules of the road, right? So use that as a gauge on it too.
And to piggyback on that, I think like there's a concept in finance called like value at risk. And as your company and as what you have at risk grows and scales, you need processes and guardrails in place to guard that risk. But the things that make us robust tend to make us slow, right? So do you mandate 100% code coverage right from the start? Maybe that cost isn't worth it. You know, you might say, oh, I care about code quality. I want 100% code coverage all the time. But if you're constantly rewriting it because you're, you know, learning so much about your customers and you're iterating, you're rewriting all your code and rewriting all your tests multiple times. And, you know, how many bugs have those tests caught? You know, are they providing the value that you think that they should be giving you? These are things that, you know, I always think about as like, again, like to echo what Mike said, you have to kind of commensurate with the amount of risk that you're protecting. Like, look at it from first principles. Like, what is the objective of this process here? What is the objective of this constraint that I have added for myself? And can I, because I'm early on and because I have very little downside risk, can I take some shortcuts here? And of course, this will vary by team. It'll vary by domain, precisely what you can get away with. Yeah.
Another place you have to, like, going back to what your risk is, like you, depending on the risk around security, that's a place you really can't cut corners. Like you don't want anybody to be hacking you.
Yeah. So
those are places where you have to be very secure.
Right. Exactly. The one thing I would say is infrastructure as code early. Like you need easy developer environments and easy deployments and stuff like that. So that's an example of like maybe early investment. And I agree, like code coverage and end-to-end test suites and those types of things. You develop slowly as the risk goes up and as the you know, stability of the platform gets there.
And don't get me wrong, like you should have tests. They should always be green. You should have a one-click deploy. Those are like tooling and infrastructure investments that always pay off.
Yeah.
But do you need every unit test for every class that you write?
Exactly.
Depends on the context. In a lot of fast-moving startups, where you're not in a regulated space or something, like think about it and evaluate it in the context of your domain.
Yeah, your whole feature, your whole startup's going to change in 6 months potentially. So, you know, writing all those tests in that suite is just at an early time is, you know, maybe a risky move.
And going back to Adam, what you were talking about, like deploy and DevOps, like because you are a startup, you're starting from scratch, you can just pick a tool and just use it. And then everybody just uses it. I worked at big companies and like those are like, you know, massive arguments about how you should be doing all this work and like trying to like, you know, retrofit to it. But, you know, starting brand new and just being able to do that from the beginning, like infrastructure as code, like doing all the easy deployments, like just do it right away.
Yeah.
Like don't even wait. And
Exactly.
just kind of pick a standard tool to use. There's like no point in trying to, again, reinvent the wheel there.
So I want to open up the floor a little bit to ask Some questions.
There were a bunch of insights I was texting to my team. Thank you for saying all of that. I have a question about no code. So we have this traumatic experience where we built our MVP on Bubble, and it worked great for the first 3 months. We were like, oh, that was so quick. Now the problem is that we have to, we're kind of like partially moving like backend to code, but then like rather than trying to tie it up to like hook it up with this Bubble front end, we're like thinking maybe to move the front end, but then like you were saying, it's kind of like looks like this endeavor that is 6 months long, and then we're not sure. So it's what are you guys' thought about like whether it's even worth it, you know?
I'm an anti-no code person personally. I've just seen too many startups build for a SaaS startup that you're going to build on for, you know, extreme growth and opportunity with all these features and vision you want to cover. Just no code is not there yet in supporting it. So at least in my opinion. So no code is great for proof of concepts and great for singular features or like maybe internal tools or wrappers on things. It is great at that. But it's just the flexibility and data access and custom APIs that you're going to need over time. I think you're going to work yourself into a band on the no code that's like, I can make it work, but I'm investing a ton to make it work. Or it's just going to like tap out for you, and you're going to have all this foundational investment on the no code that you literally cannot do anything with.
So if we didn't, do you suggest like moving as soon as possible anyway?
I mean, I need to know the scenario a little bit more, but most likely, yeah. If you're a long-time SaaS company that you want to build a ton of features in the future, probably,
Yeah, because I think like no code, it's good for its like box that you want to get in. And I think it's also good for like proof of concept.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to really build on top of it, this is going to be your product, then you have to have stuff that you can like customize and iterate with. And also like, what's your competitive advantage? If you're doing it no code, anybody could do it. So you want to be able to like have stuff that you know that you can do more with. I also think if you thinking I need to redo something, just redo it now. Like don't even wait another day.
Yeah.
Because it won't probably take as long as you think, and do it while you're smaller because it's way easier.
Yeah, you learned a ton doing it. So sell it to management, like you learned a ton. I know what to build now, right? And that's the good thing. Yeah.
Nobody ever deploys the prototypes to production, right?
Yep.
Exactly.
I mean, in a lot of those cases, like you might not have a choice because like it's like accreted all these dependencies and people like depend on it because they're, oh, this thing works, so let's just keep using it. And then before you know it, you're painted into a corner. Sometimes like the best move to do like something in that case is think about like basically proxying it and then like owning that proxy layer and then adding all the new stuff at that layer, so you can eventually think about deprecating and moving off of whatever it is you're trying to move off of, because oftentimes you don't have the opportunity or the luxury of saying, I'm going to stop the world for 6 months before I can rewrite this and deploy the thing and switch it over, and everyone's going to magically learn how to work it and everything. Like the business has to, wake up in the morning and keep using it. So you get yourself into a deeper and deeper hole, right? Where like you have feature requests, you have bugs to fix, and then you keep adding things to this no code solution or whatever it is that you've built that was supposed to be temporary or supposed to be a proof of concept. And that's like a common use case, right? Where like, oh, like this thing that I did that was supposed to be, like internal use only or whatever, now is like this thing that everyone depends on. Often you just have no choice but to like basically proxy it one way or another. And then you can own that proxy layer and that's all yours. It's like the only thing that I've found consistently to be like, the reliable way to migrate off of a legacy platform of some sort. Like just proxy it and then eventually replace it with the proxy so that it's transparent to everyone.
Can I ask you a quick question? So when you're talking about this proxying, do you mean that like they kind of the layer? Are you saying that like we're adding a coded layer to a no code something and then kind of like just move parts of the functionality to this layer and then gradually replace and deprecate the older versions? Is that about what you were saying?
More or less, right? Like all your new functionality, if you can, you build it in the proxy itself, right? So you stop iterating on the thing underneath it and you freeze that in place. Anything that you haven't implemented yet in your replacement proxy, right? You pass through to the thing that you're trying to proxy, and then you eventually consume all of it, and then you can kind of gracefully shut it down. And then you have all kinds of issues to deal with there, like data gravity and all these other issues. But that's like the general principle for, like a migration that always works is like, can I proxy it and then figure out a way to like gradually replace more and more of it until I eat it away?
I always call this changing the wheels on the tire while the car's running, right? Like you need to continue to do your business, right? You can't stop for 6 months, and you need to push new features. And so by putting that proxy layer, as Peter is like, you can start to do some new stuff while the existing stuff's running, and slowly move it all over.
Kind of building on what you guys are saying about no code. We have a really good question from one of our virtual audience members. Karen Gage asked, for a non-technical co-founder, how would you go about building that MVP solution if you don't have a technical co-founder yet? Would no code be a viable alternative there, or are there any other pieces of advice that you can offer?
So as a technical co-founder, you don't need a technical co-founder, probably, like,
for a non-technical co-founder
Yeah.
who doesn't have it.
Yeah. So you don't need one, is my point. But like, you do need a technical counterpart, right? And so you do need someone that you can look to for advice and advisory along the way. That can be contractors, like we're talking, that can be an internal employee. No code, I think, does serve a place, like I was saying, like for a proof of concept type thing. You need to learn, right? Like early stages of startups, maybe you're not like ready for that investment in the full coded application, but you have a pointed solution on top of a no code will allow you to learn and advance your thought process, and thereby be a little bit more accurate when you're ready to shoot for your full coded version. And so that's the way I'd like to see it used, more and more as startups are going.
Yeah, I think if you're non-technical and you just want to see if something's going to work, like, yeah, give it a try, because it also will help sell you to a technical counterpart you're trying to find, or like if you're trying to get interested in your idea. Having it done in no code, it might give you a better idea of whether it's going to work or not. But I also think it depends on kind of what you're trying to make. Is it something that's suited to those platforms, like, or not? Like if you're making something similar to what other people use no code for, it's probably fine. But if you're really trying to do something very different, it's probably not going to serve you.
Yeah. And I think I'd like to go back to a point that Mike made earlier, which is like just to work backwards from your goal. Like, is your goal to raise a round of funding? Is it to find a co-founder? Is having the prototype itself the milestone? That might change your perspective on what you're trying to accomplish and how you can accomplish it. Maybe you don't need a prototype. Maybe you don't need no code. Maybe you just need a slide deck. Because sometimes just finding a technical co-founder and someone who's like has very marketable skills and asking them to take on a lot of risk in exchange for only equity, for example, it's like a square peg in a round hole. Developers want to get paid in cash if possible, and take some of the risk off of them if possible. So if all you have is hopes and dreams, go to an investor and sell them on that, exchange that for cash, hire someone. That's often easier than trying to find a way to like build something cheaply, or to find someone who will do it for you cheaply, because you have the wrong currency, basically.
Are there any more questions in the room before I start asking my own personal ones? All right. So in the day and age we live in, I know that artificial intelligence is all over the place. You can't get away from it. How much, say I were to start my startup right now, how much of a disadvantage would I be at if I did not use any type of artificial intelligence to any extent within my business?
I mean, it kind of depends on what you're trying to do, but just in general, like software development, like all the tools are already using it. So you're probably going to use it whether you think you're using it or not, because it's already part of the ecosystem.
Okay.
It's just like a trick question, because like it depends on what you mean by AI or artificial intelligence in general. Like there was a time when like compilers were considered artificial intelligence, when like being able to route between A and B on Google Maps was considered artificial intelligence. So I mean, today, like if you're doing a lot of software engineering and you're not using something like GitHub Copilot or one of the LLM based coding assistants, I think it puts you at a substantial disadvantage. Whether that is going to make it matter for your success or your failure, I think is still out there. But in the long run, like you would not want to be coding without one. It's like writing a Word doc today without spell check. It's just going to become part of our lives, and we're not going to think about it, because it just makes you so much more productive in exchange for basically nothing, right? Yeah,
I think this expands outside of just engineering too. I think with ChatGPT and advancements, and I'm using it to help write statements of work and help summarize meeting notes and collect user feedback, and so it's a definite advantage for any founder or startup person working in a startup, just wearing many hats. Also, like the way I can ask questions and learn new subjects to ChatGPT. I had a healthcare related app that I didn't have experience in, and I needed to learn, and so I was able to learn really quickly. So if you got to make use of all the tools at your fingertips when you're a startup founder or employee that's trying to juggle the amount of tasks and the variety of tasks that you're doing. So totally, I think it's a huge advantage. I think just that, speaking to like a ChatGPT, but like Peter's point, like, yeah, AI is in everything now. Elasticsearch has a ton of great models built in now for AI, and like there's a lot of great AI tools in all the clouds, and so I would just be smart about, or intentional about, where you're trying to use AI. Like, don't just try to do the wrapper on lipstick on a pig AI version. Like, really try to solve a unique use case with it, or again, work backwards from your goal. Like, what is that thing you're launching? What's that press release going to read? And how does that, how does AI wrap in there to show value to your customers on the thing you're trying to launch? And that's what you should stay focused on.
I appreciate that, because it was more so, obviously there's software developing and coding with that, but as far as developing software is also business acumen that you also need. So combining those two was perfect. So I appreciate that. Yeah, appreciate that answer. I have no more questions for you. You got off.
We do have a question over here.
Great.
All right, there it is.
Hey guys, so we've talked about leveraging agencies, outside agencies, to help with development in-house employees. I think you also see these kind of like frameworks around lean development, like involving a lot of iteration, and there's also this shift towards freelance. So I'm wondering if what frameworks for development are y'all seeing right now that kind of work the best, where you've got all of these different types of people, I guess, working on your projects?
So I actually have a slide I made on this that breaks down, freelance versus offshore versus, contractor versus hired. And, it's, you gotta focus the right use case, the right role, right? So, are you looking to fill a role that brings intense industry subject matter expertise to your team, and what's the right fit for there? And are you looking to offload some of the sort of day-to-day tasks that are just bogging down your team, and what's the right fit there? So really just scope that based on the role to find the right fit. I think you'll understand which of those fit better for those, but that's the way I would think about it.
And if you were asking about agile, or what types of agile to use, just do what the people want to do on your engineering team. Like, at this point, it's not worth trying to come up with something crazy. If they already know one and they like it, just do it.
Yeah.
Like, a big thing about it is, are you being iterative? Like, you're not trying to do weeks of work. It's frequent commits. You wrote something down and then you're submitting it and you're reviewing it. Like, that's really the gist of what you're trying to do here. And whatever process the engineering team likes or your contractors like, and you just let them do that. It's just going to be easier when you're starting out.
Just the common language.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you just need to pick a common language that you all talk. And so I agree. It's almost like whatever one feels the most natural, and it gives you that common terminology and process. Yeah.
And if you don't know, just look one up. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. Yeah.
Any
Okay. Yeah. So this question is not about no code. It's about offshoring. So why did you pick India, and did you consider other parts of the world, like Eastern, we leverage the part? I'm sorry, I don't want to sound cynical, but I'm originally from Russia, and when this Ukrainian shit happened, a lot of people just fled, and they were all looking for jobs, and we basically found our CTO who moved to Israel, and all of our development team is scattered around in different countries. They don't want to live in that country anymore. So is that, there is a problem of culture fit, right? They have to at least speak the language that you speak and sort of understand the reality. So did you look at other clusters? Because I think India is also getting expensive. I mean, not compared to the US, of course, but compared to India.
Or not compared to South America too. But
we're South America, by the way.
So So I mean, we picked India because of relationships and luck. So like there was not a like well market map, and we said that's where we're going. It was we built a trustful relationship and capability in India first, which is how we got there. Looking back on it, I think it's actually a great decision for us for a couple of reasons. One, English is actually taught in schools. It's a common language. It's the common language across the states of India because there's actually many different dialects which are spoken in India. So English is actually taught in schools, not just as a second language, sort of like we think about a second language in the U.S. taught in schools, you know, but it is a primary language you're learning as a student in India. When you look at places like South America, you know, English is taught as a second language. And so there's still a good amount of people that speak it, but it's not like that primary language where everybody's as fluent from what we've found. So I think that is one comparison difference. Time of day, it's sort of a negative, right? It's like less overlap. Like I get it than maybe a Latin America, South America option. And so, you know, there's pros and cons to that. Sometimes a great benefit is I can request something by the end of my day and it's done by my morning, right? And then the other con to it is like meetings are a little bit tougher. You know, so there's pros and cons to all of them, but you know, that's what we found with India so far. Yeah.
Yeah, we have contractors through agencies and also like this people we know, and they're not in India, but they are in like all over the world. And it's again was through relationships I already knew, like we trusted them. And like if like your CTO or CEO knew somebody, like just go for it because it's especially you want to try to go fast. It's gonna be easier if you already have a relationship with those people, and then you can figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
I think going back to what you're saying, like you don't want to spend like weeks, like, you know, trying to divine the optimal like global solution when you're first getting started. Like that, you can get there if you make something successful. But when you're first getting started, you just want to be fast. So if you already have a relationship, it's going to be fast.
Relationships and trust are the key thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Any more questions? Oh, gentlemen. Well, there it is.
Hi, my name is Dinesh, and I work with Jane and work quite a bit. But yeah, my question is more around like we are talking about like somebody who already has raised money or has money. But in terms of like if you are trying to start a company, a lot of costs, even though you can do your technical work and everything, a lot of costs are cloud cost, and you know, like especially if you're developing on public cloud, and if you're developing say AI solutions or something like that, they cost a lot of money. So how do you go about like, you know, creating that frame, let's say infrastructure where you can actually show value of your ideas that you are doing, but still, you know, not break your, you know, bank or something?
That's a great question. So, I mean, first of all, leverage all the credits you get as a startup within all the cloud programs. You know, there are great incentives and programs out there for different VC backed and not VC backed and partnership programs. And so like, make sure you're asking all the right questions, talking with the 100 people on the cloud side that you should be talking with. But like, you know, as far as like, how do you show MVPs along the way to show benefit? Smart architecture, I guess, in decisions and really good sort of thoughtful design, I think along the way is the only thing I can really think of. And maybe that doesn't solve every use case, but obviously you're going to have to really pick and choose where you're investing and how you're doing that architecture, making sure you have good processes, turn it off at night if it's not being used, and some of those types of things, try to control costs along the way. But most cloud costs that get run away are mostly misuse and misarchitecture, is from my experience, right? It's like people forget the server's on. You know, that old project we used last month stayed on for an extra few weeks and those types of things. So, you know, some good oversight and processes can help. It doesn't solve everything, but that's my experience.
Yeah, there are a lot of incubators, accelerators, angel funding groups that, you know, have relationships and they can get you bundles of software and credits in the cloud, and they can defray a large portion of what it takes to get you to MVP. If you need a bunch of compute for specifically machine learning and AI, maybe that won't go quite as far just because of what it costs to run those kinds of programs. I've known multiple startups that got their hands dirty. They went to, you know, a store and bought a video card, bought 24 video cards, put them into a rack in the office, and that has a payback period of like 25 minutes because if you pay, you know, whatever list price is on Amazon versus getting a video card and running and training your models on that, that pays itself back really, really quickly. And that's not a scenario where you need like high availability or failover or whatever necessarily. So that's the first place I would look, is like, are you okay, dealing with a rack, dealing with a data center? Because in some cases early on, that actually makes a lot of sense. You don't have to always outsource everything to the cloud.
There are good frameworks coming up too about cloud cost optimization as well. So whether you're running Kubernetes or these types of things for larger scale applications, like there are good cost management tools that you can be. So you could look into that as well.
Any more questions?
If I can add to that question really quick. So every single cloud provider, I'm usually pretty loud, but every single cloud provider is willing to give you $100,000. So whether it's Google, AWS, Azure, freaking IBM,
Oracle,
they'll all give you $100,000. The only thing you have to be careful about is that there's usually a time limit. So what I usually tell startups is don't subscribe to that until you're actually ready to use it. Otherwise, you'll end up like if your burn is $1,000 a month and you ask them for $100,000 and there's a year, you're going to waste 88,000 of that because they won't give it to you again. So, but $100,000 will last you a long way if you're doing it right.
Good call out.
yeah. And then you need to be just making sure your architecture is platform agnostic at that point, so you can go cloud to cloud. And
Because they'll give you even more.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There you go.
Listen, Microsoft gave me 150. They'll give you some more, but
Yeah.
you have to ask next.
I'm all set. Closing remarks, anyone?
You didn't tell us you were going to ask that.
I know.
I didn't prepare it.
That's the
Closing
toughest
remarks.
question of
I'm
the
sorry
day.
about that.
Just prioritize and stay at it. Like it's not gonna manage itself, right? You got to be actively manage all these things and keep the show on the road.
Yeah.
Learn how to use spreadsheets, make everything ingest and produce CSVs. A lot of software and SaaS tools that you buy are basically fancier spreadsheets. You can save a lot of money early on when cache is critical by just getting really good at spreadsheets.
Yeah, if you haven't created enough data to need to use the tool, then don't.
Yeah.
It's still human manageable.
Google Sheets.
Google Sheets.
Yeah.
No,
Excel.
I mean, you're saying don't use the SaaS, which
I mean, for one of the things we use is inventory management, like your software engineering, hardware engineering. We don't have that many. So like there are tools for inventory management that you need when you're bigger, but when you're small, you don't need them. So like just start with whatever is still like human manageable in a spreadsheet, like do it in a spreadsheet.
Yep.
But to go back for one of the things you said earlier was ruthless prioritization. That's the thing I say a lot too. Like really just focus on what you're trying to do, what value you're trying to get, what tests you're trying to get, what you're trying to learn, and what is the bare minimum you need to do that.
Yep.
Well, thank you for tuning in for Bang for Your Buck. Hope you got a bang for your buck. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.